never worked at T-Mobile. He did, my boyfriend, but I'm wearing his shirt. Hey guys, so today we are finally jumping into chapter 12 of Women Who Run with Wolves. I know we're really excited to jump into this. I know it's been a minute since chapter 11. The chapter took me a minute because obviously it hit me very close in my personal life. I feel like every video always hits me really close in my personal life, and as these videos go on, it hits me even closer and closer to the point where it's harder to share the information. But yeah, this one definitely hit me close and was like, you know, causing a lot of things to come up and helping me move through a lot of things as they were coming up. So cue my months-long break from social media video. So today we're going to get into chapter 12, Marking Territory, the Boundaries of Rage and Forgiveness. At this point in our journey, after healing many of our wounds, after bringing them to light, after giving ourselves healing pleasures like chapter 11, it's natural to come to a point where we can experience rage. I've come to understand this as almost a awakening. It's like we've opened our eyes to our wounds, we've seen the pain that it caused, we've healed our wounds, we're in the process of fully laying them to rest, and it's like we're looking around us and we're like, hold up, what the why did this even happen to me? And that's completely understandable. In fact, it's completely natural to be mad at. So in today's chapter, Estes teaches us how to deal with that rage. Before we get into the story of today's chapter, I want to read this little excerpt from Estes. She says, "Once women remember the origins of their rage, they feel they may never stop grinding their teeth. Ironically, we also feel very anxious to disperse our rage, for it feels distressing and noxious. We wish to hurry up and do away with it, but repressing it will not work. It is like trying to put fire into a burlap bag. Neither is it good to scald ourselves or someone else with it. So there we are, holding a powerful emotion that we feel came upon us unbidden. It's a little like toxic waste. There it is, no one wants it, but there are few disposal areas for it. One has to travel far in order to find a burial ground." So now we're gonna get into the story of the Crescent Moon Bear. So I just wanted to share with you guys before I get into it. I started working on this chapter like way back when I first put out chapter 11. In fact, I think I was working on this chapter before I even put out the actual video for chapter 11 because the video took a minute for me to edit and stuff like that. This story of the Crescent Moon Bear, I read a while ago, and you know, it's just been very influential to my life. I've been thinking of the hair from the Crescent Moon Bear 24/7 lately. And I think after I read this story, you guys will be too. So let's just get into it. Disclaimer. There are sometimes words in these videos and in Estes books that I just don't know how to pronounce. Sometimes I skip over them, sometimes I try to pronounce them. Sorry if I do it wrong. Not trying to be insulting at all. I try my best. Yeah. There once was a young woman who lived in a fragrant pine forest. Her husband was away fighting a war for many years. When finally he was released from duty, he trudged home in a most foul mood. He refused to enter the house, for he had become used to sleeping on stones. He kept to himself and stayed in the forest day and night. His young wife was so excited when she learned her husband was coming home at last. She cooked and shopped and shopped and cooked and made dishes and dishes of bowls and bowls of tasty white soybean curd and 3 kinds of fish and 3 kinds of seaweed and rice sprinkled with red pepper and nice cold prawns, big and orange. Smiling shyly, she carried the food to the woods and knelt beside her war-weary husband and offered him the beautiful food she had prepared. But he sprang to his feet and kicked the trays over so that the bean curd spilled and the fish jumped into the air, and the seaweed and rice spilled into the dirt, and the big orange prawns went rolling down the path. "Leave me alone!" he roared, and turned his back on her. He became so enraged she was frightened of him. Time after time this occurred until finally, in desperation, the young wife found her way to the cave of the healer who lived outside the village. "My husband has been badly injured in the war," the wife said. "He rages continuously and eats nothing. He wishes to stay outside and will not live with me as before. Can you give me a potion that will make him loving and gentle once again?" The healer assured her, "This I can do for you, but I need a special ingredient. Unfortunately, I am all out of the hair from the crescent moon bear. So, you must climb the mountain, find the black bear, and bring me back a single hair from the crescent moon at its throat. Then I can give you what you need, and life will be good again." Some women would have felt daunted by this task. Some women would have thought the entire effort impossible. But not she, for she was a woman who loved. "Oh, I am grateful," she said. "It is so good to know that something can be done." So she readied for her journey, and the next morning she went out to the mountain. And she sang out, "Arigato, Zaisho," which is a way of greeting the mountain and saying, "Thank you for letting me climb upon your body." She climbed into the foothills where there were boulders like big loaves of bread. She ascended up to a plateau covered with forest. The trees had long draping boughs and leaves that looked like stars. "Arigato, Zaisho," she sang out. This was a way of thanking the trees for lifting their hair so she could pass underneath. And so she found her way through the forest and began to climb again. It was harder now. The mountain had thorny flowers that seized the hem of her kimono, and rocks that scraped her tiny hands. Strange dark birds flew out at her in the dusk and frightened her. Excuse my pronunciation. She knew they were muuunbooked, spirits of the dead who had no relatives. And she sang out prayers for them. "I will be your relative, I will lay you to rest." Still she climbed, for she was a woman who loved. She climbed till she saw snow on the mountain peak. Soon her feet were wet and cold, and still she climbed higher, for she was a woman who loved. A storm began, and the snow blew straight into her eyes and deep into her ears. Blinded, still she climbed higher. And when the snow stopped, the woman sang out, "Arigato, Zaisho," to thank the winds for ceasing to blind her. She took shelter in a shallow cave and could barely pull all of herself into it. Though she had a full pack of food, she did not eat, but covered herself in leaves and slept. In the morning, the air was calm, and little green plants even showed through the snow here and there. "Ah," she thought, "now for the crescent moon bear." She searched all day and near twilight found thick cords of scat, and needed look no further, for a gigantic black bear lumbered across the snowfall, leaving behind deep pad and claw marks. The crescent moon bear roared ferociously and entered its den. She reached into her bundle and placed the food she had brought in a bowl. She set the bowl outside the den and ran back to her shelter to hide. The bear smelled the food and came lurching from its den, roaring so loudly it shook loose little stones. The bear circled around the food from a distance, sampled the wind many times, then ate the food in one gulp. The great bear reared up, snuffled the air again, and then disappeared into its den. The next evening, the woman did the same, setting out the food, but this time, instead of returning to her shelter, she retreated only halfway. The bear smelled the food, heaved itself out of its den, roared to shake the stars from the skies, circled, tested the air very cautiously, but finally gobbled up the food and crawled back into its den. This continued for many nights until one dark blue night the woman felt brave enough to wait even closer to the bear's den. She put the food in the bowl outside the den and stood right by the opening. When the bear smelled the food and lumbered out, It saw not only the usual food, but also a pair of small human feet as well. The bear turned its head sideways and roared so loudly it made the bones in the woman's body hum. The woman trembled, but stood her ground. The bear hauled itself onto its back legs, smacked its jaws, and roared so that the woman could see right up into the red and brown roof of its mouth. But she did not run away. The bear roared even more and put out its arms as though to seize her, its 10 claws hanging like 10 long knives over her scalp. The woman shook like a leaf in high wind, but stayed right where she was. "Oh, please, dear bear," she pleaded. "Please, dear bear, I've come all this way because I need a cure for my husband." The bear brought its front paws to earth in a spray of snow and peered into the woman's frightened face. For a moment, the woman felt she could see entire mountain ranges, valleys, rivers, and villages reflected in the bear's old, old eyes. A deep peace settled over her, and her trembling ceased. "Please, bear, dear bear, I've been feeding you all these past nights. Could I please have one of the hairs from the crescent moon on your throat?" The bear paused. This little woman would be easy food. Yet suddenly, he was filled with pity for her. "It is true," said the crescent moon bear. "You've been good to me. You may have one of my hairs, but take it quickly, then leave here and go back to your own." The bear raised its great snout so that the white crescent on its throat showed, and the woman could see the strong pulse of the bear's heart there. The woman put one hand on the bear's neck and with her other hand took hold of a single glossy white hair. Quickly, she pulled it. The bear reared back and cried out as though wounded, and this pain then settled into annoying huffs. "Oh, thank you, Crescent Moon Bear. Thank you so much." The woman bowed and bowed, but the bear growled and lumbered forward a step. It roared at the woman in words she could not understand, and yet words she had somehow known all her life. She turned and fled down the mountain as fast as she could. She ran under the trees with leaves shaped like stars, and all the way through she cried, "Arigato zaisho," to thank the trees for lifting their boughs so she could pass. She stumbled over the boulders that looked like big loaves of bread, crying "Arigato zaisho," to thank the mountain for letting her climb upon its body. Though her clothes were ragged, her hair askew, her face soiled, she ran down the stone stairs that led to the village, down the dirt road, and right through the town to its other side and into the hovel where the old healer sat tending the fire. "Look, look! I have it! I found it! I claimed it! A hair of the Crescent Moon Bear!" cried the young woman. "Ah, good," said the healer with a smile. She peered closely at the woman and took the pure white hair and held it out toward the light. She weighed the long hair in one old hand, measured it with one finger, and exclaimed, "Ah, yes, this is an authentic hair from the Crescent Moon Bear." Then, suddenly, she turned and threw the hair deep into the fire where it popped and crackled and was consumed into a bright orange flame. "No!" cried the young wife. "What have you done?" "Be calm. It is good. All is well," said the healer. "Remember each step you took to climb the mountain. Remember each step you took to capture the trust of the Crescent Moon Bear. Remember what you saw. Remember what you heard and what you felt." "Yes," said the woman. "I remember very well." The old healer smiled at her gently and said, "Please now, my daughter, go home with your new understandings and proceed in the same ways with your husband." Disclaimer: all of the stories read from this book are suggestive. They're based on psychological analysis. Most of them can be applied to outside situations in life, like involving multiple people, but they're supposed to be applied to situations within your own psyche, which is why there's multiple players within your own psyche, less as figurative for actual life, other people relationships, if that makes sense. Before we get into discussing the story, I wanted to read this little excerpt of what Estes says about using rage as a teacher. A great philosopher prince named Shotoku Taishi lived in Japan at the turn of the 6th century. He taught, among other things, that one must do psychic work in both the inner and outer worlds. But even more so, he taught tolerance for each human, every creature, and every emotion. The balancing value of emotion is certainly an act of self-respect. Even raw and messy emotions can be understood as a form of light, crackling and bursting with energy. We can use the light of rage in a positive way in order to see into places we cannot usually see. A negative use of rage concentrates destructively in one tiny spot until, like acid creating an ulcer, it burns a black hole right through all the delicate layers of the psyche. But there is another way. All emotion, even rage, carries knowledge, insight, what some call enlightenment. Our rage can, for a time, become a teacher. A thing not to be rid of so fast, but rather something to climb the mountain for, something to personify via various images in order to learn from, deal with internally, then shape into something useful in the world as a result, or else let it go back down to dust. In a cohesive life, rage is not a standalone item. It is a substance waiting for our transformative efforts. The cycle of rage is like any other cycle. It rises, falls, dies, and is released as new energy. Attention to the matter of rage begins the process of transformation. Allowing oneself to be taught by one's rage, thereby transforming it, disperses it. One's energy returns to use in other areas, especially the area of creativity. Although some people claim they can create out of their chronic rage, the problem is that rage confines access to the collective unconscious, the infinite reservoir of all imaginal images and thoughts. So that a person creating out of rage tends to create the same thing over and over again, with nothing new coming through. Untransformed rage can become a constant mantra of how oppressed, hurt, and tortured we were. A lot of times people confuse emotions for the toxic actions that are related to them. Rage is not violence. Rage is not destruction. Rage is an emotion. Destruction, violence, all of those things are actions. Actions, toxic actions, clearly, obviously need to stop. But rage is imperative to understand for us to grow into better people and to be able to follow our wild soul lives. I really like the movie Inside Out. I know it's like a kid's movie, but I think it's really good. I think it teaches kids a lot about like how all emotions deserve the stage and they're imperative for us to grow as people and grow in our personalities and grow in our lives all around to become whole people. It's important to acknowledge and give all of our emotions a platform, you know? Including the angry ones, including the sad ones. A lot of times in society, we like to put things in boxes. We like to say that things are all bad or all negative. Like we like to say sadness or anger or all of that is just all negative, when really all of these things are a part of life and things are a lot more gray than black and white, you know? So we can't like completely deny our anger and have a fear of feeling rage or feeling sadness like we've talked about. We've talked about how it's important to acknowledge our sadness, but a lot of times it's not talked as much about how it's important to also give voice to and understanding to our rage. So, through the story of the Crescent Moon Bear, Estes clearly talks about how to give voice to rage, how to give it a little ear, how to sit it down, how to talk to it, how to not give necessarily follow through with the toxic actions, but how to understand your rage and then therefore get past it. The first step of this journey is visiting the healer. Just as in the story, the young woman immediately dealing with her husband went to go visit the healer to fix the situation, that is what we have to do inside. Estes says this about the healer. Healers in fairy tales generally represent a calm and unperturbed aspect of the psyche. Even though the world may be falling to pieces outwardly, the inner healer is unswayed by it all and maintains the calm to figure out the best way to proceed. Every woman's psyche contains this fixer. It is part of the wild and natural psyche, and we are born with it. If we have lost track of its whereabouts, we can call it again by looking calmly at the situation causing us rage, projecting ourselves into the future, and from that vantage point, deciding what would make us feel proud of our past behavior and then acting that way. Looking into the future, saying what would make me proud in this situation, and then acting that way. That's hard. I don't know about y'all, but that's hard for me a lot of the time. In some respects, we are all basically children on the inside. There is no real point when it's you grew up. You know what I mean? You're all of us are an accumulation of how we've been able to grow as people. We are still the people that we were born to be, and also we are grown people based on a lot of experiences and influences of our lives. As children, we're led by our emotions. We don't understand them though. All types of events decide things for us, and we have no control other than to feel the emotions that come along with the events. Estes explains in the book that a child who's been raised with repeated oversteps and neglects of their boundaries, secretiveness, or basically anything that would harm a child in any way, the child is going to be extra sensitive to those types of abuses, and as an adult, still be extra sensitive to those types of abuses. They have a heightened awareness of disrespect in their adult life, high boundaries, or even just heightened sensitivity to their own boundaries. They have these sensitivities not necessarily because as adults these things happen more often to them or more harshly than they happen to other people. They have these sensitivities because of how they happen as a child. They're more aware of the pain because there's a little child inside of them promising to never let them go through that type of pain ever again. But if they have yet to deal with that child and teach that child inside and, heal that child oftentimes is not aware of the nuances of the situation, not picking up and not aware that they're not aware, as children are, and just throwing pain at you that you aren't able to connect to because you're not able to connect to that inner child inside. Are we getting a 360 here? So it's inner kid inside, really pissed off about dealing with a certain situation as a kid. As an adult, that inner kid could have learned and understood their emotions and understood, how to deal with things in a healthy manner and stuff like that, so that as an adult, the inner kid is still inside and maybe it still feels the pain, but it's able to understand the nuances of the situation and deal with the pain in a healthy manner, and the adult is connected to the child on the inside, because the child on the inside doesn't really ever understand the nuances, but the adult understands the nuances and it's connected to the inner child, so it's able to deal with the situation and deal with the pain that the inner child is feeling while also expressing itself in a healthy manner. Or you have the inner child that never learned what the nuances of the situation were, never understood the situation, is in the inner adult. That inner adult is not connected to the inner child, can't understand what's happening, and that inner child is just throwing pain and hurt at them and trying to defend them from what's happening to them without an understanding of what the goal is in the situation. so therefore kind of ruining it for everybody. So in dealing with rage, we have to understand that that inner rage is that inner child trying to protect us. That inner child loves us. It doesn't deserve a nuke bomb to get rid of it. It deserves love and protection, acknowledgement for trying to protect us. It deserves understanding for why it feels the need to protect us. But also, it is a child, so it needs to be taught to deal with the nuances of growing up in adult life. Esty says in the book, we want to use anger as a creative force. We want to use it to change, develop, and protect. So whether a woman is dealing with the aggravation of the moment with an offspring, or some sort of searing, lengthy burn, the perspective of the healer is the same. When there's calm, there can be learning. There can be creative solutions, but where there is firestorm, inside or out, it burns hot and leaves nothing but ash. We want to be able to look back on our actions with honor. We want something useful to show for feeling angry. While it is true that we sometimes need to vent our rage before we can progress to learning calm, this needs to be done in containment of sorts. Otherwise, it is like throwing a lighted match into gasoline. The healer says, yes, the rage can be changed, but I need something from another world. Something from the instinctual world, the world where animals still talk and the spirits live. Something from the human imagination. Esty says this in the book about the mountain that we all share. While it might be good to go into the real mountains, if possible, there are also mountains in the underworld, in one's own unconscious. And, luckily, we all carry the entrance to these underworld right in our own psyches. So, we can go into the mountains for renewal with dispatch. So the mountain is kind of like a symbol for levels. It's almost like a game. Esty says this, the lowest part of the mountain, the foothills, often represents the urge towards consciousness. All that occurs in the foothills is thought of in terms of maturing consciousness. The middle part of the mountain is often thought of as the steeping part of the process, the part that tests the knowledge learned at lower levels. The higher mountain represents intensified learning. The air is thin there. It takes endurance and determination to stay at the tasks. The peak of the mountain represents confrontation with the ultimate wisdom, such as in mythos, wherein the old woman lives atop the mountain, or as in this story, the old wise Bruin. We take to the mountain like the freaking Avengers, soaring level to level, fighting off our villains, never to be done fighting evil. Okay, I'm done with this analogy. I don't watch superheroes. I don't really know that much about it, but I was trying to use a cool analogy. Basically what I'm trying to say is we take to the mountain, it's like levels, and we do it to, over time, cycle out the negativity. We take to the mountain to learn to transform the negative narrative that our inner child has learned to survive by, which no longer serves us going forward. Esty says in the book, on the mountain, we find additional clues about how to transform the hurt, negativism, and grudge-holding aspects of rage, all usually felt and often warranted initially. One is the phrase, arigato zaisho, which the woman sings to thank the trees and the mountains for allowing her to pass. Figuratively translated, the phrase means, thank you, illusion. In Japanese, zaisho means a clear way to look at matters that interfere with deep understandings of ourselves and the world. An illusion occurs when something creates an image that is not real, such as heat waves on a road that make the road seem wavy. That there are heat waves is accurate, but the road is not really wavy. That is the illusion. The first piece of information is accurate, but the second piece, the conclusion, is not. Arigato zaisho, men who love me, yell at me. Arigato zaisho, I must be pretty in order for others to value my intellect, kindness, or wit. Arigato zaisho, I must have a skinny figure in order to be considered healthy or fit. Arigato zaisho, I must be pretty in order to be desired or valuable or worthy. Thank you to my inner child for trying to protect me through all of these beliefs. And so, to learn the final part of letting go and putting the past to rest, we will learn about Deskinos. But before we get into Deskinos, we have to talk about the bear and why it had to be a bear in the first place. Esty says, bear symbolized resurrection. The creature goes to sleep for a long time. Its heartbeat decreases to almost nothing. The male often impregnates the female right before hibernation, but miraculously, the egg and sperm do not unite right away. They float separately in her uterine broth until much later. Near the end of hibernation, the egg and sperm unite and cell division begins, so that the cubs will be born in the spring when the mother is awakening, just in time to care for and teach her new offspring. Not only by reason of awakening from hibernation as though from death, but much more so because the she-bear awakens with new young. This creature is a profound metaphor for our lives, for return and increase coming from something that seems deadened. In the psyche, the bear can be understood as the ability to regulate one's life, especially one's feeling life. Bearish power is the ability to move in cycles, be fully alert, or quiet down into a hibernative sleep that renews one's energy for the next cycle. The bear image teaches that it is possible to maintain a kind of pressure gauge for one's emotional life, and most especially that one can be fierce and generous all at the same time. One can be reticent and valuable. One can protect one's territory, make one's boundaries clear, shake the sky if need be, yet be available, accessible, engendering, all at the same time. The hair from the throat of the bear is a talisman, a way to remember what one has learned. As we see, it is invaluable. That the bear was so fierce and strong in its ownership of the mountain, yet so graceful and giving to the woman when the time called for it because it was right and good and fair to do so, it's a perfect example of how we should be in our soul lives. We should be strong, ferocious, fierce, and protective of our soul lives, but also be able to be generous and open and giving when it is sensible and fair to do so. But the journey is not complete until the talisman is burned, until the hair is burned. This is symbolic of the magic of the talisman. The true magic of the talisman only exists with the talisman's absence. It is the magic of knowing that the magic is inside. The magic was in the lesson, was in the journey. Only we can save the day, and only we can do it by practice. Esty says in the book, we can have all the knowledge in the universe, and it comes down to one thing: practice. It comes down to going home and step by step implementing what we know, as often as necessary for as long as possible or forever, whichever comes first. It is very reassuring to know that when one is in a burgeoning rage, one knows precisely and with the skill of a craftswoman what to do about it. Wait it out, release illusions, take it for a climb on the mountain, speak with it, respect it as a teacher. There's a saying, before Zen, mountains were mountains and trees were trees. During Zen, mountains were thrones of spirits and trees were voices of wisdom. After Zen, mountains were mountains and trees were trees. You must learn to bridge the gap to your rage. You must learn to understand it, because no matter how well you learn to understand it, it still burns inside. So if you don't know how to understand it, then it burns wildly with no control. But if you do come to understand it, you can at least control it. Esty says in the book, Now, a woman who comes to terms with rage returns to mundane life with a new knowing, a new sense that she can more artfully live her life. Yet one day in the future, a something, a look, a word, a tone of voice, a feeling of being patronized, unappreciated, manipulated against one's will, one of these, will crop up again. Then, residue of pain will catch fire. Rage left over from old injuries can be compared to the trauma of a shrapnel wound. One can pick out almost all the pieces of shattered metal from the missile, but the tiniest shards still remain. One would think that if most are out, that would be enough, but not so. On some occasions, those tiniest shards twist and turn within and cause an ache that feels like the original wounding, rage rising up, all over again. But it is not the original and vast rage that causes this welling up. It is the very small particles of it, the irritants still left in the psyche that can never be fully excised. These cause a pain that is almost as intense as that of the original injury. Then, a person tightens up, fearing the full blow of the pain, in effect causing more pain. They are involved in drastic maneuvers on 3 fronts. One in trying to contain the outside event, one in attempting to contain the pain broadcasting from the old injury inside, and one trying to secure safety of position by running head down in a psychological crouch. It is too much to ask an individual to take on the equivalent of a gang of 3 and try to KO them all at once. That is why it is imperative to stop in the midst of it all, withdraw, and take solitude. It is too much to try and fight and handle feeling gut shot all the time. A woman who has climbed the mountain withdraws, deals with the older event first, then the more recent events, decides her position, shakes out her ruff, puts up her ears, and then goes back out to act with dignity. Now, none of us can entirely escape our history. We can certainly put it in the background, but it is there, nevertheless. However, if you will do these things for yourself, you will bridge the rage, and eventually everything will calm down and be fine. Not perfect, but fine. You will be able to move ahead. The time of the shrapnel rage will be over. You'll handle it better and better each time, because you'll know when it is time to call in the healer again, to climb the mountain, to release yourself from the illusions that the present is an exact and calculated replay of the past. A woman remembers that she can be both fierce and generous at the same time. Rage is not like a kidney stone. If you wait long enough, it will pass. No. You must take the right action. Then it will pass. And more creation will come into your life. The truth is that pain will always exist. There is no magic cure. But all we have is to do the work in the meantime to heal the pain on the inside so that when it comes back up, when it flares back up, it's easier to treat, and we keep treating it and keep treating it. Now, we've talked a lot about how rage can be healed, but it's important to note that even rage has its time to shine. This video is getting pretty long, so in the next video, we will be talking about the time when rage is appropriate and how to know the difference and the balance. That'll be part 2 of chapter 12, Women Who Run with Wolves. Let me know how you guys are enjoying this in the comments below. Part 2 will be up tomorrow. Peace. Oh, and yeah, put your bell on and stuff if you want to know when part 2 is up, because that is a good idea. Okay.